This is the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center podcast. I'm Alex Victora, Assistant Center Director of the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center here in sunny Tucson, Arizona. For the 2017 Week of Remembrance, the fourth annual Week of Remembrance, the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center is releasing a whole pile of content. We want to tell you the story of one fire, the Nuttall Fire from 2004. For the fourth annual Week of Remembrance, a commemoration of the Arnell Hill Fire anniversary on June 30th, and the South Canyon Fire anniversary on July 6th, the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center is releasing a variety of content, videos, blog posts, podcasts, and 6 Minutes for Safety, all focusing on a fire from 2004, the Nuttall Fire. We take a close look at July 2nd, 2004. One shift on one division, with many lessons. No one died on the Nuttall Fire. That said, it was a very serious situation. Fire shelters were deployed, firefighters were entrapped, and a very serious medical emergency took place, all simultaneously. The Nuttall Fire is an opportunity to take a close look, from multiple perspectives at one single event. For a bit more context as to why we're examining the Nuttall Fire and this one shift on it, I got on the phone with Travis Dotson, Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center analyst, and asked him, so why are we talking about the Nuttall Fire?
First off, I would start talking about the Week of Remembrance and what that is, because this is all part of it. And from my understanding, I don't have the best understanding, but from my understanding, it's an intentional time frame beginning with June 30th and culminating on July 6th. Dates that are near and dear to the fire community. That's Yarnell and South Canyon. And this Week of Remembrance is an effort to just recognize that, I think, and the solemnness that comes with those anniversaries, and acknowledging their proximity. The summer is filled with tragic anniversaries. And so that week, the 6 Minutes for Safety message is focused. It's an effort. And from my, understanding, we just put a little bit more effort in the morning, whether it's morning briefing or whatever. There's a theme, and for 7 days we just use that time to reflect and to hopefully capitalize on some of the hard-earned lessons, I guess you could say, and at a national level. I think that's the main thing. The main effort there is that there's people in fire camps and district picnic tables and refuge engine bays across the nation talking about the same thing, for the very real reason that during this time frame, wildland firefighters die.
So with the 30th being the anniversary of Yarnell and July 6th being the anniversary of South Canyon, I mean, the Nuttall Fire isn't a fatality fire. So why are we talking about it in between those two big events?
The Nuttall Fire is going to be the context. It's going to, those 5 days in between, those people sitting at the big picnic tables or whatever are hopefully going to use Nuttall and some of the scenarios that we present in the Nuttall Fire story to have these conversations. And why Nuttall? It's an old fire, 2004. It's funny that that's old.
That makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Makes me feel old. I remember where I was when I heard about Nuttall,
I heard it. I literally heard air attack. I was sitting up there at Manning Camp, or not at Manning Camp, but I was running the crew at Manning Camp, and I was sitting up at Reef Rock, and heard Curtis on air to ground, and it was just funny because we could catch some traffic and just started listening, and then all of a sudden you could hear that something was going wrong, and for sure, sitting there hearing one end of a conversation about some scary stuff, that's burned in my memory, and of course, that's part of it, in terms of why Nuttall. But I think why Nuttall in between Yarnell and South Canyon is because they're not that different. There's not much that separates Nuttall from Yarnell or South Canyon, other than the fact that everyone walked away. It was that close.
That's a pretty big difference, though, isn't it? I mean, how can you?
Yeah. And all of those fires were at that point somewhere in time, right? Before Granite Mountain headed down into the bowl, that's the same time that Flagstaff was about to head down to H4. That's the same time that Prineville was about to head up the line. That's the same time. Not literally like the clock, although it's close on some of them, but just where a crew is in terms of making a decision to move. That's 3 hotshot crews that made a decision to move.
Right.
And based on what the information they had, based on intel from their lookout, all of that stuff, to me, it's crazy similar. And the outcome is drastically different. And that's where you get people saying, no, you can't compare those because the outcome is different. And I'm pushing back and I'm saying, no, let's take the outcome out of it. And let's look at the situations.
Right.
And it's scary, but also I feel like there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with that outcome of nobody dying. There's a freedom there we can talk about it a little bit more openly.
Right.
And I don't know why. I don't know why that is. It's just different emotion, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I recall about Nuttall was seeing those, and I can't remember if it was the AAR summary or the deployment summary or whatever, but it was a it was a document that looked like nothing I'd ever seen before, and that was kind of in my mind, going back to 2004, in the wake of Nuttall, that was the beginning of kind of this, something's different here, and it was, the talks they had, the response after the fact, which you're right is certainly largely influenced by the fact that there were no serious injuries. There was one serious medical heat-related, we now know, rhabdo situation that was a very serious situation, but there were no fatalities in the entrapment and shelter deployment, and which is a critical difference, obviously. But what else? What else is a good reason for talking about Nuttall?
Well, people are around.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing for me too, is having the chance over the last few years to get to look at this one particular event. To me, that's the thing I come away with, which is, in this case or any other, serious situation, almost regardless of outcome, I would say, it's hard to tell the story, the single story. It's probably impossible to tell a single story. We've been led to believe that there is a story, and for years there kind of was. There was the official narrative, the official agency account, the report, and people would read it and go, well, that's what happened. And of course, that's not true, because inevitably you run into somebody who was there and they say, well, that's not really what happened. They missed this and that and so on and so forth. So that's what I look at Nuttall as an opportunity to really try to get and we've only got, less than a dozen of the perspectives that were in place up there on July 2nd, but
for sure. And I think the other, going along with it being easier to talk about, there is people to talk to about it, but it's also, it's over 10 years You know what I mean? So that lends a certain amount of freedom and perspective as well. Um, and I think that you're right. Culturally, we've gotten to a point where we accept what you're talking about a little bit more. That yeah, there can be multiple perspectives, and this illustrates it perfectly. Um, but I just think we're able to accept that it's not as much. We don't have to work as hard for people to agree to the notion that a crew member is going to see it differently than a squad leader, and the squad leader is going to see it differently than the overhead, and the person that was flown into some random helispot is going to see it differently than the crews that hike down in, and the engine crews that pull tows from the top. Everybody's going to see it differently. Everybody's going to have a different experience. Everybody's part of the story, and sometimes they're in conflict, and that's okay, because that's what it's like. You know, I mean, how many people sometimes point to, well, every report says that communication is an issue, and you somehow think that means we have to have perfect communication, rather than, you know why every report says that communication is an issue? Because communication is an issue, period.
Right. Yeah. Tragedy, near miss, accident, or not.
Or perfect, no bad outcome. Everything went as planned. The prescribed fire that stayed in, and all the additional resources were on scene. You know, the perfect shift. Communications, I guarantee you, there was some struggles with it.
Right.
So yeah, I think that time and space, and the absence of fatal outcomes, provides us a little bit more comfort, I feel like, in talking about a shift on a fire, because we have that backup of, you know, all's well that ends okay. Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to come at that, but that's a big thing. And you know, the other piece that we didn't mention is, maybe it's a little bit more important for me, being a Southwest person, is, I mean, the list of people involved it's a who's who of the Southwest. You know, it's Flagstaff hotshots. You know, Paul Musser. It's Chris Wilcox. You know, firing group supervisor. It's Curtis Heaton up in the air. It's Dan Otrogi's Type 1 team. You know, it's just these are the people I came up looking up to, and a lot of people did, and you know, and they've continued on to other aspects, and a lot of the people involved have continued on to, you know, fairly prestigious positions. So yeah, that's part of it, is the personalities involved, but that's true of every fire, I guess. You know, depending on where you're from, there's always some big shots around.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess taking yourself back to 2004 and knowing who was involved in this event, how did that change your view of this outcome at the time? Knowing that people like Chris Wilcox, what is Chris now? He's the chief of fire for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Curtis Heaton, who's director of fire in the Rocky Mountain area for the Forest Service. Well, yeah, knowing that folks like that were involved, how did that change your view of Nuttall?
These are the operators. These are people I look up to, and if something that drastic happened and these folks were involved, what it allowed me to access was this notion that, man, there's got to be more to this. There has to be some sort of, I need to make sense of this. It was not as easy. It was almost impossible for me to say, oh, well, they screwed up. It must just be bad firefighting. You know, that wasn't, I could not, my mind would not allow me to blame this on bad firefighting because of who was involved. That's the simple way to say it.
Yeah, that's meaningful.
Think of the power of that. What if we could apply that sort of empathetic question to every event that we hear about because of who was involved? And I knew it immediately because I was listening to half of it. Because of who was involved, my mind didn't allow me to immediately go to, oh, shelters were deployed, somebody was entrapped, therefore it must be bad firefighting done by bad firefighters. Like, that just wasn't a place that I was capable of going because of who was involved. My heroes, basically. And what it makes me think now is, what if we could apply, I guess the questions I had in my mind at the time were, there's got to be more to this story. There's got to be some circumstantial things. Wow, what I wonder what the circumstances were. I need to understand this. And, man, I hope everybody's okay and that kind of stuff. That, what if we could view all incidents that we hear about that we don't have all the information for? What if we could hear them and view them with that sort of empathetic questioning? I just feel like that would be a different approach from what I was taught, and I feel like a lot of people are taught, which is something bad happened, somebody screwed up.
Well, there's a few thoughts on Nuttall. Maybe you've never heard of the Nuttall Fire. Maybe you've never worked on the Coronado National Forest in southern Arizona, where the Nuttall Fire took place. Maybe you're there now on the Fry Fire. Regardless, if you've never heard of the Nuttall Fire, or if you have and have some preconceived notions about what happened, stay tuned.